We welcome tonight's special guest, Lyn Lucibello. I'll just quickly say, Lyn caught the industry bug at a very early age from her father, Tony, an industry heavyweight himself who attracted productions from the US and England to the Pinewood Studios, where Lyn spent much of her childhood. We're going to hear all about Lyn's work and her career, but here's just a few of the films that she has worked on in the past few years. Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut, Molly Game, which is just finished, I think, being posted at Pinewood in Toronto. XXX, The Return of Alexander Cage, Pixels, RoboCop, Kick-Ass, The Rocker, Dreamhouse, Grey Garden, Suicide Squad, and the film credited by the Toronto Star in 2011 with saving the film industry in Toronto, Len Wiseman's Total Recall. Please help me welcome Lyn.
Is this on? Nope, okay.
Oh, just turn it on.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. I'm new. Hi.
Hi, Lauren.
So I thought we would start with talking about Total Recall, the film that saved Toronto. Do you want to talk about like how it came to be? And
sure.
What happened?
I was actually doing reshoots on Dreamhouse, another project at Pinewood, and we were on our third run of reshoots on that project with Jim Sheridan. We had the stage occupied with our sets for a year. Anyways, the third one came around and I got a call from a very good friend of mine, Rick Kidney, who's a producer that I met. I had 4 years I spent in North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, working with the Dino De Laurentiis Corporation. And I was an assistant accountant and Rick Kidney was a second AD. So you never know when you meet people in this business when you're going to reconnect. And he went on to be a big film producer doing very big projects all over the world. He called me up and he was in Montreal. They were going to Montreal. And as everyone knows, sometimes, you know, they're told something in Montreal and when they get there, it's not the story that they were told. They were being given stages that they were not happy with. So he jumped on a plane. He called me up. He jumped on a plane, came to Toronto. I was at Pinewood. I'm like, come here. You're going to love it. It was the first time he'd ever been to Pinewood. Fell in love with it. Brought the project there. That's how Total Recall came to be. Rick Kidney.
Okay, but I have already lots of questions, but I think we'll start. We're going to watch the trailer for Total Recall for people who maybe have seen it or it's been a little while, because actually it was 2011 you shot that?
2011,
and
that's
2012
correct.
it was released.
That's right.
Time flies. Okay. So, how much of that was shot in studio?
So much.
Yeah.
When you see him standing on the balcony, that's all in stage 4. The part where it's going, the terminal where it's going up and down through the worlds, that too was on stage 4. All the helicopter stuff was on stage 4. I'm trying to think, stage 4, we repurposed it a couple of times. It's a phenomenal stage. We were at U of T for quite a bit of it as well. But yeah, a lot of it. Oh, all the new Asia stuff, all the stuff that was Asian, that was in Jumbo stage. We built a phenomenal set. Probably in my entire career, my favorite set was on that movie in Jumbo stage, New Asia. We had built a waterway, we had canals and boats. It was a phenomenal multi-level city that we built in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So from that time you got the phone call and he got on a plane and came and saw Pinewood, saw Toronto. I imagine they were already looking at Canada because of tax credits and the dollar and everything.
Right.
From there to when you started prep, and then how long was prep and shoot for something that big?
I started prep immediately, so I didn't do round 3 of the Dreamhouse reshoots. I started right away, and we started budgeting and, you know, starting to acquire crew and amassing resumes and just putting the project together. I probably had 20 weeks of prep on that. And then we shot, I don't know, we had 3 units at one time going at the same time. I don't remember how many weeks it was, but it was probably 20, I'm going to say 20 weeks with 2 units going.
Wow.
It was big.
And so that was the biggest film that had been in Toronto.
That's correct.
At that point.
Mm-hmm.
What was the process you know, obviously Pinewood is well versed in huge productions with their studios in other cities. They have such an amazing history that I recommend people look up. It's so many amazing directors have come through Pinewood. What was it like working with not just Pinewood but the city and crew? Were people used to, like, people weren't used to something like this? Was it just sort of?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I have to say, there was one scene we had shut down the Lakeshore Boulevard underneath the Gardiner Expressway.
I remember that.
Yes, and everybody was so upset. And then the news came out and they're filming and they're like, oh, look what they're doing. They're shutting this artery down. And Colin Farrell and Jessica Biel stopped. And the news reporter, you know, put the camera right on them, and right away they stopped, they smiled, they waved, and all was forgiven. So it just takes that. And then we were like gods, you know, in the city. So, but it really is amazing, like how one gesture like that can change the whole dynamic of a film production. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are things you can't control. You don't
No.
know what your cast will be.
Exactly.
How that will work. Do you want to look at some of the B-roll from Total
Sure.
Recall so people can see a little
Yeah.
bit of, this is some of the in-studio material, so you'll get to see the sets as they were when you were a crew versus the finished product.
Right.
So I'm just going to backtrack for 1 second. Who in the room is a director? Okay. Who is a producer? And who's in, this is no disrespect, this is just in general, who is actively in the industry in a crew position or, yeah. Okay, great. It's helpful to know when to ask questions. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you got started?
Sure. My father is a retired first assistant director, so I've been around the business my entire life. Is this working? Yeah. Okay. So he, back in the 70s, he managed Kleinberg Studios long before Pinewood was here, which was kind of the go-to place in Toronto. There was Lakeshore Studios and Magder's Studios and Pinewood. And Pinewood were the larger stages, which are now kind of small compared to Pinewood. And I spent most of my childhood up there and followed my dad around like the lost little puppy, like, please, please, get me a job, I'll do anything. So he finally managed to get Marilyn Stonehouse, who you may or may not have heard of. She hired me as a person to come in and answer the phones on a movie called Welcome to Blood City with Jack Palance, Keir Delay, and Samantha Agar. So I did that, and when Alice Ferrier was a coordinator, and when she was done with me, she didn't need my help anymore. One accountant on the show, she's like, I need help. She yanked me into her office, Rosemary McCarty. That's kind of my first job. It was a summer job. I was still in high school, but I was around the business my whole life, up at Kleinberg Studios. So he managed it. We had horses up there. I used to take out horse rides. And so when I started working on shows, I'd go up early because I didn't have a license or a car. So I'd go with my dad, who'd start at, the crack of dawn. So I'd go feed water the horses, wait for them to come into the office, go work. Then they'd be done. I have to wait for my dad, go feed water the horses again, and go home. And that was my summer, and I was in heaven. I loved it. So that's kind of how it all started for me. It's Kleinberg.
That's amazing. And so you spent some time in the U.S. as well.
That's right.
Yeah. So what brought you there, and then what brought you back?
So my career went into accounting, which is, by the way, a really wonderful way to learn the business, especially back then, because like I said, there was one accountant. So when I got to work in accounting, there was two of us. So it's like you have to know everything. There was no computers. There was no payroll companies. Like we had to do everything. I had to converse with the crew. I was on set a lot as an assistant accountant. It kind of bothers me now because accountants aren't on set much anymore. But I used to be. We didn't have background people. I'd have to go pay the extras. I'd have to show up at 3 o'clock in the morning waiting for them to wrap them, and I'd pay them in cash. It was crazy. But it was great because I learned so much, and I got to meet the crew, and it was different times, So I had a very big advantage that a lot of people don't have these days. So anyway, so I continued working as an assistant accountant. Marilyn said to me, go to school, take accounting, I'll hire you. And I believed her, and we know how producers are now. You can't believe them all. But anyways, Marilyn was true to her word. So I went to Humber College, I took accounting, I graduated, they hired me. So I was working as an assistant accountant and was fortunate to get the job on Dead Zone. And that's how I met the De Laurentiis people, because they produced that, and David Cronenberg directed that. So when they opened up their studio down in North Carolina, Martha De Laurentiis was now together with Dino, and she was the accountant. And when she got promoted to associate producer, she called the team from Dead Zone to come down to North Carolina, and that's how that happened. Like, it's all connections, right? You don't know every time you meet somebody where that's going to lead in the future. So that's how I ended up in North Carolina. And then I was there more for Martha and as an assistant, and then on Firestarter, Frank Capra Jr. was the producer. He is like the most amazing man, rest his soul, he's passed, but he came back to do a movie called Maria True Story, starring Sissy Spacek, and his son, Frank Capra III, and I used to be in the office at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, because back then they gave us no crew, like we had to do everything. We worked ridiculous hours. And it's nice now that they do crew things better in the office. But I got to know him very well. So he told his dad, you should hire her as the accountant. I had a few people like trying to knock me down, didn't want me to take the job. Frank said, sit with me, we're gonna work on a budget and then we'll present it to Dino. And I was nervous, I was young, I was like 24 years old. So I'm like, okay, just remember I started at 15. But so I did have a lot of experience, although these people were trying to say I couldn't do it. So I went with Frank, we presented the budget, and Dino's like, you go back, I need to understand, you do a cash flow. He doesn't speak English well. I'm like, okay. So I go back, I do a cash flow with Frank. Frank is like holding my hand throughout this whole process. I do it, give it very simple to Dino, and he's like, why this a week is so much? Why this a week is so much? Why this a week is so much? You go back, I have to go to a screening, come back and you explain. So I go back and it's like the writer payment came up, like I knew, right? So I come back with all my notes and he's like, okay, you my accountant. And that was it. I did all his movies after that. Even though his finance department and the accountant that I was working for didn't want me to leave, because then it took 2 people to replace me because I worked silly hours. But anyway, so that's my story for North Carolina, which really, really was pivotal for me when I came back to Toronto, because it was the people I met down in North Carolina that gave me the opportunity to become a production manager in Toronto, which is probably the next question. So, yeah. And that was on the Skulls. Okay. So a friend of mine, Fred Caruso, I worked with him down there. I did Year of the Dragon. I took over and finished up because the accountant quit, so I cleaned up the mess on that one. So I got to know him on that. And then he did Blue Velvet. I did Blue Velvet with him, which was probably one of the easiest movies I've ever done, but I get the most, people get more excited about that movie than pretty much anything else I've worked on, maybe until Suicide Squad. But so then he came to Toronto and he's like, Lyn, I'm coming to Toronto, this is your next project, you know, I want to do a budget. And I'm like, Fred, would you consider hiring me as a production manager? He goes, you're the production manager. I go, just like that? He goes, just like that. And that's how I got my first job as a production manager. But it was great that my dad was the first AD, my brother was the second AD. Like, I had a lot of support. So it was great.
That's amazing. I've actually heard a few people say coming up through accounting,
it's a great
production management before producing.
Yeah.
Is really,
it's a great avenue because you do get to learn everything, because everything costs money. People always say to me, "What? I mean, I know what a producer does." Yeah, sure you do. I know what a director does. Okay, maybe you do. I said, well, what does an accountant do? I go, none of them are there unless they're getting paid. So we do absolutely everything. We have to know. We have to pay absolutely everybody. So.
Yeah. So, with that in mind, you kind of covered a bunch of my questions, but those are a lot of big breaks that have happened. And I think this industry, as you know, most people know, it's not, you know, just who you know because of connections, it's who you don't even realize you're meeting that sort of leads to new things. So then getting back here, what were you doing right before the Total Recall? You were doing movies, but they just weren't as huge. That was the start of like huge productions that we now know.
Right, that was 2010. So I started production managing in 1999. So then I did Shall We Dance, and oh, now I have a very bad memory. That one actually got pulled out of Toronto. Miramax got scared about SARS, and we ended up in Winnipeg on that project, which, by the way, I had a great time in Winnipeg. I would go back there. In the summer only.
For anyone who's watching, in the summer only.
And then I did Dark Water, and there's a lot. Four Brothers, that was a Rick Kidney one. Yeah, so yeah, I was very fortunate. Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium, I did quite a few projects before Total Recall.
Yeah, and so after Total Recall, do you think that film, was it just through production that you think LA and New York and everywhere started to notice again Toronto? Obviously there's a big downturn after SARS. Or was it after release, or what was are you active in recruiting productions here since then? Or is it just a lot of relationships, people know you're here,
yeah.
They know the benefits of
well, it's
here.
all about, they call, you start doing budgets, you location scout, you have to sell it. Like, you have to sell it. The studio facilities are amazing, you know, the crews are amazing. And the city is amazing. When we did Pixels, I mean, what we did downtown, shutting down all those streets, was phenomenal. Our DP was brilliant, and he did practical lighting, so we didn't have generators parked everywhere. So we changed all the light fixtures on Adelaide Street. We did, I think there was like 250 light fixtures between Bay Street, Adelaide Street, running up and down those streets for 3 solid weeks. We shut the city down, and the city was fabulous. They were so supportive.
It's amazing. Well,
Yeah.
and that's a big thing. We're going to get to Suicide Squad, which famously shut down Yonge Street.
That's right.
It's amazing. So, I'm checking what other way we'll get to advice after. Why don't we watch the Suicide Squad trailer?
Sure.
Everyone knows it's a giant. I just did a movie in Pinewood in January. There were giant Suicide Squad posters outside my window of our office. So I saw that poster every day, all the time.
That was one of my favorite posters.
So fun. So, obviously the scope is massive.
Yeah.
Cast is massive.
Suicide Squad was a very unique project for all of us. There was an enormous amount of secrecy on that show that made it difficult for everyone. Nobody was allowed to have a script. Nobody was allowed to have a call sheet. It was complicated. Everything was in code name. The movie was called Bravo 14. We weren't allowed to breathe Suicide Squad. But I'd be talking to people and they'd be saying Suicide Squad, and I would like clam up and say that word. You can't call it Suicide Squad, it's Bravo 14. So it was difficult for the crew, I'm not gonna lie, because they couldn't have scripts. And we had certain people were allowed scripts, and they were locked up in a safe, and they could sign them out, and then they'd have to sign them back in. And if they didn't sign them back in, there was security on them right away. Nobody was allowed to bring cell phones to the set. Background, it was difficult, you know, they don't want to give up their cell phones, but everybody had to give up their cell phone. It was a difficult project from that standpoint for the crew, because they didn't even know on the call sheet what the scenes were. They didn't know who the people were. Like Deadshot was not called Deadshot, he was called some, I don't even remember. I was getting confused with all the code names. Who's who? Like, I'm a little confused. So it was a complicated show to do from that standpoint, but it was very exciting, very exciting project to work on.
And won some Oscars for local talent.
That it was actually the Italians won the Oscar, yeah, for makeup. Makeup and hair. It was Alessandro and Giorgio out of Italy.
Sean.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing something that big, which I think we can all just start to fathom how massive that would be of a film, what is your immediate team like? And what's your team, let's start with that. What's your immediate team for you?
For me, well, my office staff, my transport department, I get, you know, my ADs, locations, art department is critical. Like, I have a fabulous art director and his construction team. They're top notch, like top notch.
And what about, but for you personally, do you have assistants? Do you have how many staff?
My production office.
Your
I don't
production,
have
yeah.
an assistant,
Yeah.
but I have my office staff, my
yeah.
coordinator, and the travel coordinator, and then I'll get a UPM for the second unit, which was huge. Projects like that are really complicated with all the stunts and physical effects. Visual effects are difficult, but not so much for me, but the stunts and the physical effects are, they just add a level of chaos and confusion that's really hard to stay on top of. I think I probably spend more of my time managing stunts and practical effects than anything else.
Right.
Because I have such a great art department.
Yeah.
So, and that's what it's all about. It's all about surrounding yourself with the right people that you know, you trust. They will come to you if there's a problem, you solve it. You know, I'm always going into the producer with my heads of department, whether it's my transport coordinator, my art director, we're in there, my production coordinator. We go in and work together. We work very closely. It's key. It's key. Can't do it all by yourself.
No, yeah. And so for something like this, from the moment you get the call, or maybe talk about a little bit how Suicides came here, because I feel like it also was another movie that just continued to put Toronto on the map, continue to say we can make bigger and bigger productions. Obviously, there's been a big track record that you've been involved with, but
Right.
this seems like everyone, because the secret, everyone knew about it. Everyone's very, not everyone, I have a stepson, so I'm very well aware of DC and Marvel movies all the time and when they're coming out for the next like 5 years, but a lot of people feel that way about,
Yeah.
about comic book movies.
Well, I would say that Suicide Squad came here because of Pinewood, and Colin Wilson came with, I don't know if he came with David Ayer or not, but he came and he scouted Pinewood, and while he was here scouting, he met me, and that's how I got on the show. So I didn't bring it here, Pinewood brought it here.
Amazing, I know, we're gonna make Megan talk too. So, did you take over all the stages for Suicide Squad? Most of them?
Most of them.
Yeah. I don't know if everyone's seen, and I think you can see it from the Pinewood reel, they have, and I'm going to get the space wrong, this massive studio that is like a cavern, but you can build the most, that's where Pacific Rim was shot, the most amazing, massive sets.
Well, the other thing on Suicide Squad that we utilized was the back lot, which was phenomenal. We built a city on the back lot with all the destruction, and we had all the stunt guys going through, so we could rig it properly, wire it up for them. They could rehearse, and we didn't have to worry about weather, because if the weather's bad, then we just go do something else, but we're on the back lot.
That's, yes. So I think we should talk a little bit about shooting on Yonge Street. I think you see some of it in the trailer for people, which is, I think, very exciting when you have big movies shoot here, and then people get to see it, and be someone who was in traffic on either Total Recall or this, then gets excited about it. It is one of those things that you're like, well, it's worth it, because we can tell Suicide Squad's kind of amazing. You recognize it as Toronto, but it's not Toronto. It's people who aren't from here can't tell.
So we shut down Yonge Street. We did shut it down on weekends and at night. So we had, parameters when we could go onto the street and parameters when we had to get off the street. Pixels was also the same when we had a lot of debris. So we bring the debris out. We place it before it's dark, but after we're allowed. And then we had to get it all off the street on Monday mornings to allow traffic by, I think, 6 a.m. So again, my scenic artist, he was brilliant. He built everything on these little flatbeds, and he stored it all on the back lot. And then when we went out to the street, especially when we were on Bloor Street, he would bring these out. They opened up, and all the debris, all the destruction was there, and then they would just add to it. And then at the end of the night, they would just fold it all up and wheel it out of there. It was brilliant because it was such a high level of destruction. So,
yeah. It is brilliant. After something this big, where do the sets, do they just get taken apart? Does some of it get shipped to the U.S.? Is it stored so you know about reshoots? We store. They'll decide what they want to keep, and we'll keep bits and pieces of everything until they picture lock. A lot of times we're shipping stuff down to LA. A lot of times they come up here and do reshoots. It depends on what they want to do. Right. Sometimes it's easier just to send it to them and they just do it down there. But I don't think we did any reshoots on Suicide Squad in Toronto. I think they did it all in the US. Yeah. Oh, there's a question.
yeah.
No, you totally can ask questions.
Okay.
Except for you have to wait for a microphone.
Oh, I can project.
Because there's cameras.
It's, hello.
That works.
Okay, good.
There you go.
The question is,
It's about sets. If you are shooting at your studio at Pinewood, do studios, they probably have their own. They probably have their own standards or procedures for the sets. They want them back. They might have their own policy about that.
That's right.
But are there pieces and things that they would just say, oh, you can have that or keep that. I'm not taking that wall down or something like that. And if they do that kind of situation, where along the way does it get auctioned off, or do you keep it? Because I knew someone who'd go around the world to auctions and buy movie sets,
Right.
buy sets from it. He opened a franchise chain of restaurants in Montreal and had like James Bond, Two-Man Submarine,
Right.
and Cessna from another film, and he'd have the Round Table of another movie. So do you keep sets?
We do sell them. With sets, it's a little trickier because the director will have an opinion about that, and the designer, because they don't want their sets to appear in any other project or any other movie. But the studio, like for us personally, it's like the more we can get rid of, the better, because it's very expensive, very difficult to store these sets. So we want to keep specifically what's needed for any potential reshoots. Now, on Suicide Squad, we did keep a lot of stuff. They didn't do anything here, but they did this big expose at the distillery. So they came and took tons and tons of stuff there and set it all up for the opening. And Will Smith came up, and Margot Robbie and David Ayer, and they did a big presentation at the distillery. So it was really, really worthwhile having everything.
Hi. Yes.
Try it again.
I can repeat if needed.
Oh, that would be great. Actually, it doesn't work.
I'm very curious about the secrecy stuff that you're talking about. Is this, I mean, I assume it's to keep leaks, you know, nobody wants to know, but this sounds really extreme. How
It was
it
extreme.
compared to others, and was it effective, or, I mean, how do you feel about
It was difficult. The crew were frustrated. The crew didn't know what the scenes were for the day. It was very frustrating. So the heads of department would get a call sheet that would be handed to them in the morning. They could have that call sheet, and at the end of the day, they'd have to hand it in. So it was hard for the crew. They were frustrated, but again, I have such a stellar group of people. I'm very fortunate. But it was hard. It was hard.
Did it work? Was it?
It worked. It worked. Yes. It worked for the creatives. Let's just say it was very frustrating for the crew, but they just made it happen. They figured it out as they went along. And everyone was allowed to read the script. They could come in, read the script. The scripts were in blue. My production manager on the second unit actually took a snap of a script page, and they knew right away. And they called him on it. Oh no, it was on his computer. He did a screen grab, and they went straight to him and said, "You can't do that." They knew right away. I don't know how they knew, but they knew. Yeah. So I'm like, you got caught.
It's becoming more common, you know, a lot of the serialized dramas that shoot here. I'm from BC originally, and when they shot two of the Twilight movies there, it was bananas because people for those shows were flying out from the US to stalk the cast. It was crazy. I had friends who worked on the show, and they were like, we actually had people climbing fences at the studio. It was kind of crazy. So I feel like as, you know, social media is growing and people are so excited, especially with these franchise films, you know, people want to know what they are and want to have a sneak peek. And also something like Suicide Squad, what an amazing cast.
Yeah.
So I feel like you've always read about if you saw them in Toronto or where.
As soon as the sun went down, I had to draw the drapes in my office because they were afraid somebody might have a long lens and look at something I might have up on my wall. They were that nervous about it. And I remember when the Batmobile came, well, we were not allowed to talk about the Batmobile or Batman. And anyways, the Batmobile came, they're gonna run it up and down Yonge Street, and it was the night before, and they said to me, we need to do something on Yonge Street. We need to black out up and down Yonge Street. I'm like, not gonna happen. I said, on Pixels, we didn't have Pac-Man, so we had a reference vehicle. I suggest that we just have a reference vehicle and then you guys have to CG it in after. That's the absolute only way the Batmobile won't be seen in Toronto. There's no possible way that we can stop the Batmobile from being seen. And they said, well, when we shot in Chicago, they didn't see it. And I go, I don't know what to say in Chicago, but it's not going to happen here. You're right at Yonge Dundas Square, like the busiest intersection of our city. So. And it was seen, it was all over the media, and it's all good media. And I remember Warner Brothers came up, and I'm like, am I in trouble? Are you mad at me? And they're like, oh no, publicity is good publicity, don't worry.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the crew process? Because I imagine as a producer who's done a lot of movies here, you have a lot of people you love working with, but obviously a lot of that creative is a relationship with the studio and the director. How do you manage that, and do you get to work with your same crew a lot?
There's a lot of crew. So first of all, I can give them 3 fabulous options in pretty much any category, like top-notch options. So I'm pretty happy with whomever they choose. But yeah, I've been lucky. I always have a really stellar crew. So, and it makes me look good.
It's true. It's such a team. It's such a team effort making movies.
We have one trailer left.
Oh.
The B-roll.
Oh yeah, do you guys want to see some It's RoboCop, yes, RoboCop. Am I making, no?
Triple X.
Oh, I'm sorry, I lied, it's Triple X. So something like that, was that shot here, or was that?
No, that was in the Dominican Republic.
So how do you work with productions when you have the pieces of these big movies being shot all over the place?
Well, we handled it all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we started in Toronto. Because of schedule issues with Donnie Yen and Vin Diesel, we started in Toronto, then we went to the Dominican, and then we came back to Toronto, which worked well because we, again, repurposed Stage 4. We had a big Pirate Cove sequence in Stage 4 that we shot here, not in the Dominican.
Oh.
And then when they went to the Dominican, we changed it over and built another set in there, which I'm forgetting off the top of my head now.
So, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but what's your favorite part of being part of these big movies? Obviously, it's so much work, and the schedule that you talked about, working till 2 a.m. when you first started. So I'm sure the hours are not a hindrance for you. But yeah, what makes you still excited to do this? Well,
the people on Triple X. DJ Caruso's one of my favorite directors. I loved working with him. He's really good with the crew. He's an easy person to collaborate with. You can talk to him. It's great when you can have everybody on the crew has a good relationship with the director. It makes a world of difference. There was no secrecy on that, so the crew was all very relieved after Suicide Squad. So it was much easier for them. But complicated movie. Yeah, it was a great project. We had a great cast. We had a great cast on that show. So
before we open up to a little more questions, what advice, if someone wants to work towards what you're doing, what advice would you give somebody? Besides be nice to everyone, because you never really know who's going to be where.
It's hard. Like I know I've been fortunate, and I know that because I started in an era when there was so few crew, I had a lot of opportunity to get to know people, learn a lot. It's much harder now. It's much bigger. There's a lot, now the unions are more, there's a lot more unionized positions. Back then you could try this and try that. Now you have to join a union to try anything, apart from being an office PA or a director's assistant or producer's assistant. Everything's unionized. Oh, VFX is not unionized here. But it's hard. I think accounting is a good route. I think location managing, for ADing, those are really great ways of learning the industry from the bottom up, because ADs have a lot to do with the money side of it, because the schedule dictates the money. So yeah, it's a good route to go. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? Why? Hi.
There's a lot of stunts in movies. And so do stunt coordinators have their own budget that they approach you with? Or you really want me to hello?
I'll repeat for you.
Yeah, just,
do stunt
Isn't it
coordinators?
like-
No. I think you're in there's a little no man's land in there.
Do stunt-
Radio.
is it,
It's okay, just ask.
Do
Laura
stunt
can repeat
coordinators,
it.
it'll kick in as I'm talking, is that okay? Do stunt coordinators approach you with their budget, or is it
Yeah.
done through the producer, it's already incorporated into the budget?
It's to myself and the producer. I work really closely with the stunt coordinators, just trying to monitor it. We create a budget and then things change, and you know, maybe the asks will change. The director might change his mind on what he wants.
Right.
So it's a very, that is, I had mentioned before, is probably the most difficult part of my job is managing the stunts and the costs, because they can very quickly escalate out of control. So it's a tough one.
They can.
Yeah.
I've seen stunts being incorporated into a film after, like the script's written and everything, and they're adding, and they're saying, oh no, we have to do this, let's try this, let's try that. I've been as an actor in a sequence where they had me do a stunt as well, so I got stunt paid and actor paid. I didn't mind that.
That's right.
But the stunt coordinator had to go over to the producer and say, you know, this is going to cost you.
That's right.
And just to make
Yeah.
sure that.
So it's
there's
important
a
for the stunt
contingency.
coordinator too to have a good relationship with that director. Like, it's critical, and the AD. Like, between the AD, who is so tight with the director, and the director himself, the stunt coordinator coordinates all that, tries to put together a budget, tries to think about situations like that, tries to have some sort of a pad in there to, you know, compensate for, because it's going to happen. It always does, especially on these big action movies. And then when things start to go awry, then we sit down and we have meetings and we figure out, okay, now we have to cut something. We have to cut back on something because we went over budget on that. So that's why weekly cost reports are really important. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting question too, because about the scope. You know, not knowing everyone in the room, but big movies that are Canadian movies, we're talking more about $10 to $20 million. It's just the scale of this is so massive. So when you're when you're working with the studio and starting, you know, pre-prep on something and you have your budget, how much, you know, partly I just think it's funny. I can imagine the art department budget on something like Suicide Squad being enough to make many other films, you know, smaller scale films. So where do you start with something like that? Do they start at breakdown and you just start once once creatives are hired and it's just like any other size movie?
They break the script down. They figure out what's going to be in their best guesstimate, because it's early on, what will be a set, what will be a location. On Molly's Game, they really were pushing for us to have more location, less builds, because they think the stage is too expensive, the construction costs. But then when you break it all down and you are jumping around from location to location, the cost of transportation, the cost of location fees, it ended up being cheaper for us to build. So we ended up taking on more stages, and we saved money. The director shot, you know, 10, 11-hour days, so we were saving money there. So it really did work out, where you go on location, you're dealing with weather, you're dealing with issues, you're dealing with a lot of different situations that cost money that you can't budget because you don't know. You just don't know.
Question over here.
Can you talk a little bit more about working with the studios in terms of the politics over there and how to navigate some of those waters?
Okay, so my most important person at a studio is a production executive who's assigned to my project. So you get to know that person very well, and you start asking, who do I talk to about labor relations? That's a big part of my job, is dealing with all the unions. So liaising between the labor relations department at the studio and the unions up here, and then working out, you know, any variances that we may need for, you know, work week switches or whatever you need. Then you speak to them about health and safety, who's the point person for that, the transportation department, because especially with Warner Brothers and Sony and Paramount, they have very specific requirements. So I sit with my transport coordinator and we have meetings and we devise a plan that works for us, works with the union here, works with labor relations down there. It's really all about communicating with all the different departments. So, and you start with your production exec, and then you just start going through all the departments with that person. That's your point person.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Sure.
We have one right here.
Just, you covered most of the areas. I was just wondering if you can cover the tax part of budgeting, and if you could just elaborate on that. How does that play in your budget, and how do you similar, or like, how do you actually navigate through once there are changes and stuff like that?
Well, it's all set up. You do your budget on Movie Magic, and you set up all your tax credits right in the Movie Magic project. And then we usually use Canada Film Capital. So once we've done our first major pass of a budget, we send it over to Canada Film Capital, and then they vet what we're guesstimating for the tax credit. If we're overestimating or underestimating, they'll point out where these discrepancies are, and then we correct it. But yes, it's a major player in their decision making when they come here.
And you're all doing that before they've committed to coming. So you're doing all your, or maybe not?
No, it's an
know a rough
ongoing,
number.
yeah, it's an ongoing process. But sometimes it's before they've committed, and sometimes they've already committed. So, you know, they have a number in mind, and we need to hit that number.
Right.
So, and if it's not, if the tax credit isn't getting us there, then they look for other ways to get us there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
I actually would like to thank you for Total Recall. Yeah, because as an actor, it was really rough year for me, 2011, and a friend of mine called me. I'm still worried about it. A lot of memories. He called me and said, listen, I'm sick. Will you be able to do extras? And that's the first time in my life I've been extras. So I've done 11 days nonstop extras at Pinewood Toronto Studio. And the feed is really nice. So, and then there was a shot. So Colin Farrell turned the corner and came right next to me, and he's, how you doing? I was like,
He's such a nice man.
oh yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good. And I said, listen, I feel kind of down about doing acting. Life is not easy. What should I do? And he gave me a couple of advices. Everything has changed since.
Yeah, that's
Thanks
great.
to you bringing the project in.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, we do have to wrap up. I know that both Lyn and Lauren, but also Blake and Megan have some time. If you have any questions you want to ask, we do have to wrap it up in probably about 15 minutes. But I just want to say, first of all, thank you to all of you for coming out to support this tonight. I want to thank Ritz for being our host hotel, but I really want to thank all the staff in Pinewood Toronto for being our partner on this series and presenting these and for helping us get Lyn here tonight. This is our first time doing something like this, so please give us a huge because they really are incredible. I have to say, after booking Lyn and going through some of the stuff, I rewatched Total Recall, and if you haven't seen it, it really is fantastic. It's a beautifully stunning film. To see that they did that in a studio in Toronto is just incredible. Same as Suicide Squad. Anyway, thank you all for coming out tonight, and again, we hope to see you. We haven't booked the next one yet, but you will get an email, and we're hoping to do it in the fall. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Amazing. Thanks, sweetie.